Shocking new allegations about Sir Keir Starmer, as per a Daily Express investigation, are going to put you on the edge of your seat tonight. An Express investigation has found documents from Sir Keir Starmer's time as Britain's top prosecutor that he put his name to that mentioned the drafting and agreeing of warning notices with police chiefs that whistleblowers say had been given to suspected child rapists. A Number 10 source has told GB News that the warning notices were not drawn up or devised under Sir Keir Starmer. The Express investigation also alleges that no research was ever conducted into the effectiveness of these early intervention tools and that they were often used instead of gathering evidence. Well, Maggie Oliver, who exposed the Rochdale grooming gang scandal, told The Express how she had seen fellow officers use these letters to make investigations, in quotes, go away, and described them as an ASBO for paedophiles. Police say that child abduction warning notices, which were in use years before this document was published in 2010, are an effective way of protecting a child who is regularly missing, but may also be used to address controlling behaviour like grooming gangs, which is not associated with missing episodes. They typically warn an adult that they have no permission to associate, communicate, or have any contact with the affected child. Well, joining me now is the man who broke this story, investigations editor at the Daily Express, Zak Garner-Purkis, and my panel, of course, are in the room, but we'll start with you, Zak. When I read this story you broke, it sent a bit of a chill down my spine, if I'm being honest with you. Let's talk about some of how... Let's first of all start. How did you get to the bottom of this investigation?
Right, so this all came from... I was looking into grooming gangs in London, and I was looking through investigations that didn't really come to pass, but there being strong evidence of there being a grooming gang. And one of the lines that we noticed was a girl who'd been coerced to go to a hotel, been raped by multiple men, and then one of the officers has said, why don't we give them a child abduction warning notice? So immediate question that me and my colleague that were looking at this had was, OK, what's one of those? And when we dug into them more and more, what we essentially found was that in the years that followed the Rotherham and Rochdale scandals, the police were looking around for a way to tackle this massive problem, which had always been there, but people they were turning a blind eye to, right? And these paedophile ASBOs were kind of the perfect response, because what they would do was, when they would come up with a concerning situation with a child, or actually even worse than that, clear evidence of exploitation or child rape, they would give one of the suspects one of these warning notices. Now, in the bit that you just read, they said that they're effective. That is complete nonsense, right? We went through to see whether there was any test of whether these things were effective. And the research, you just see a long trail of academics all saying, we need to do more research to see whether these warning notices actually work. Now, the Keir Starmer bit kind of came at the end, because when we were going through it, we're kind of like, OK, so the police started using these to tackle them. When did they come about? Well, Mr. Starmer, who is quite keen to talk about in the House of Commons, I was the Rochdale prosecutor, I was the first person to do that. The first mention that we find is in the report that you've put up on the screen, where it talks about drafting and agreeing them with police chiefs. Now, why on earth the CPS was drafting and agreeing a tool for police chiefs to be using for this, I don't know. But the name on the top of that document is Keir Starmer. And
there's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. And with so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. But this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. ExpressVPN is offering up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free. That's top-level security from just £2.49 a month, and you're covered by their 30-day money-back guarantee. So just click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code now. Remember, when you're online, you are often sharing personal data, so hackers can steal your information, your passwords, your photos, and your bank details in just seconds. But ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. So why choose ExpressVPN? Well, it couldn't be easier to use. With just one click, you are protected. And ExpressVPN uses military-grade AES 256 encryption, which is the same standard trusted by the US government to guard their classified information. With their new tiered plans, you can protect up to 14 devices at once and manage passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 months extra for free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN.
They can say, there's lots of other stuff going on. When he wants to be involved as being the grooming gang's prosecutor he is, and when there's something that's a bit inconvenient, like this, which has been used, it's the number one tool. Disruption is the number one way that the British police deal with child sexual exploitation.
Indeed. What's the... Listening to Maggie Oliver, you've done a great piece of content with her as well, which I encourage people to go in and see as part of your investigation. She said here, and I'm quoting here, I worked on a case where we'd identified 97 child abusers. That investigation should have led to serious charges of child rape on a pretty industrial scale. I expected multiple charges of rape against possibly dozens of men, but instead they warned a couple of men under a child abduction warning notice, which she's dubbing as an ASBO for paedophiles, I assume. My opinion is that they were used to get rid of a job.
Yeah.
In what way are these tools not leading to prosecutions? Why are they ineffective in your opinion? Well,
so the way that these work is they provide the sort of dangerous illusion of something happening. I'll give you an example. About 2 years after Mr. Starmer's report comes out, where they talk about drafting and agreeing with them, a woman called Susan Boxall, her daughter, was in a relationship, shall we call it, with an older man. So, she's a 13, 14-year-old girl with a man in his 20s. Now, the police come and say, OK, let's give him a warning notice. And the parents think, great, that's going to stop them. If they get caught together again, they're going to do something. Guess what? Got 2 of them. He then gave her the drugs that she overdosed on and died. And the parents and the local authority thought this tool was going to protect them. And that's the dangerous thing with them, is they seem like, on paper, quite literally, something that could be effective. But the reality is they don't result. If you breach them, there is no criminal penalty. So all it is it's something that will make parents go away and say, oh, well, there's something there, isn't there? But they don't deter the people that are after the children.
Indeed. I'd like to bring my panel into this conversation now as well. Bill, of course, Keir Starmer wasn't the man who scripted these ASBO for paedophiles, if that's what we're going to call them, or child abduction warning notices, but he was still director of prosecutions while they were being used. Do you think a more effective tool should have been put in place if we were getting serious about tackling things like child sexual exploitation and abuse?
Well, moving forward from here, most certainly yes. But look, let's be clear. Keir Starmer is credited by Andrew Norfolk, the courageous journalist from The Times who broke the grooming gang scandal, with being instrumental in turning around the Crown Prosecution Service to tackle the grooming gangs. And he was the first person in senior authority to actually call out that ethnicity was part of the process that was driving this. It's interesting when I read your report, and, all power to you, Elbow, for having, sourced this, but you don't actually claim that Keir drove this process. You talk about finding documents from his time as Director of Public Prosecutions. No indication that Keir drove this process. Nevertheless, these mechanisms, I kind of get where they're coming from, but I certainly wouldn't advocate that this is the way to tackle child sexual abuse.
Well, why do it then, Bill?
I think it was about early intervention with people who hadn't reached a criminal threshold and a means of coercing them to not take that further step forward. But I think that's counterproductive. And I do think the allegations, and I've made clear that, and Number 10 has said Keir was not, did not draw these up, or they weren't devised under him. Nevertheless, this is so serious. I think there needs to be a clear statement tomorrow or Tuesday setting out what his awareness was, what was the purpose of these. And also, I understand from your report that these tools were used from 2008 to 2025. Are they still being used?
It's a good question.
Yeah. Well, the report that I mentioned, when I first came across them, that was from 2024.
Crazy.
And the other thing is it's quite junior officers that can write these up, which is why they often get used. So a junior officer walks into a situation that they're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do with this. You know what, these cases are really difficult to prosecute. This is something that gives me a sense of control, gives the parents, gives the concerned parties a sense of control. Guess what? It's going to cause problems later down the line. I just want to pick up on something that you said there, though, which is, what's he doing if he's the director of public prosecutions? Who does the buck stop with? Wasn't this the guy that, when Boris Johnson was in Number 10, that he was saying, yeah, the buck stops with him? Shouldn't he be taking responsibility? If it's his CPS and it's that strategy, and then he's going, well, it's not actually me. One of the big problems that I've got, right, when I'm digging into this stuff is that because it's all legally sensitive, right, because it's all CPS documents, I can't readily access it in the same ways with the transparency, tools that might be available. What does that mean? It means that the person who gets to tell the story of what happened with grooming gangs, or what he did with grooming gangs, is Keir Starmer. And how do we challenge that? Well, hold on a second. There's no way to challenge it because we can't access that information. So I think the call's got to be to say, Keir Starmer, if you really want to clear things up, let's see some of that stuff from inside the CPS. Do it in a way that protects the victims, but let the British public see and let the British public decide.
Hold on, you push back on me. Let me push back on you. Your report says this is found documents during Keir's time as DPP. That is not saying, and you're not saying, that Keir drove this. And you put that alongside the clear statement from Number 10 this evening that these processes were not drawn up or devised under Keir Starmer.
To repeat, a Number 10 source has told GB News that the warning notices were not drawn up or devised under Sir Keir Starmer. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister added, they are not a substitute for prosecution. Instead, they act as a first line of defence to keep young people safe and often as part of an ongoing investigation. As Director for Public Prosecutions, the Prime Minister secured the first grooming gangs prosecutions more than a decade ago, and now his government is doing more than any before to root out this vile crime. Under this government, police are reviewing over 1,000 historic cases, convictions are at record highs, and we are bringing in mandatory reporting and doubling support for survivors. All right, coming up,